Hi, today I have one of the most playable classic 3D platformers, a sci-fi amnesia-themed dark story, most likely the best on-rail shooter ever made, and one of my most favorite western-themed arcade title, and a surprisingly cute and playable puzzle platformer. So let's not waste any more time and jump straight in. The game I would like to start today's video with is the first Ape Escape. It's a third-person 3D action-adventure platformer and the first ever game historically to require a DualShock controller. It's also the very first ever twin analog stick controller, or as you know it today, just a bogus standard controller. But back then, oh my days, it was near revolutionary. I mean, its existence was difficult to justify until games like Ape Escape and a whole lot of first-person shooters that came later started popping up on the consoles. Cause while most of them were controllable on the traditional one too, the DualShock made a monumental difference when it comes to the comfort of gameplay. Coming back to Ape Escape though, its use of twin sticks was rather unique, as the left one controls the character while the right one is used to manipulate many different gadgets. And there are quite a few of these, but we'll get to them in a minute after we tackle the game's story. Spectre is a well-known monkey at his home in a monkey-themed amusement park. He's not the Elvis of all monkeys or Michael Jackson even, but he can be a low-key Ricky Martin. What he definitely is though, is wide-furred, smart, well, as much as the monkey can be, and he's generally a lovable goof that people adore. But what Spectre also is a subject to experiments of the Professor. What Professor, you may wonder? Well, the Professor's name may escape me now, but just looking at him, I can tell you that he's the real deal. He's got a lab coat, silly mustache, and close to no hair on top of his shiny like a dog's balls head. Just like Emmett Brown, the professoriest of all professors out there. And just like Emmett, he dabbles in a bit of experimentation, a scientific discovery, if you will. And two of his biggest at the time inventions are a monkey peak point helmet and a time machine. The first, while being a revolutionary invention, is in its early prototype stage and bound to have bugs. And it does, because it gives Spectre super intelligence, but also turns him into an evil asshole. If you ever played Day of the Tentacle and saw what happened to the purple tentacle when it grew limbs, it's same here in Ape Escape. Spectre, realizing his superiority over other monkeys, decides to take over the world by utilizing Professor's second invention. He gives his super intelligence to other apes too, albeit in a limited capacity, not wanting any of them to best him, and sends them back in time to rewrite history, to overthrow humans and install apes as the top dogs on the planet. Or top apes, you know, so it fits. And all of that in a sort of a Planet of the Apes scenario. So, the Professor asks Spike, cool-named embodiment of the 1990s, and the Marty to Professor's Emmett Brown, to travel across time and recapture all the escaped apes. And hence the title. Playing as Spike, you have to recapture a certain number of apes per level in different periods of time and in different locations. So you'll visit dinosaur era, medieval age and even modern times too, among others, using gadgets to stop the apes and your trusty time net to transport them back to the present. And there are quite a few of these gadgets, from a stun stick that you can use sorta like a weapon to incapacitate apes to self-propelling helicopter blade that can either lift Spike up or slow his descent, among others. Point is, there are plenty of these and they're fun to use and unlock as you progress through the game. Keep in mind, however, that all of these are there to help you, but the final act of catching and sending to the right period is done with the aforementioned time net only. All the apes are different, and there are two indicators that will help you figure out whether they will be easy to catch or will they straight up attack you with machine guns, rocket launchers or tons of other stuff too. So, smart helmets and pants that they wear are the best way to figure out what to expect from the apes that you are after. Helmets have sirens installed on them and their color can tell you how aware of you a particular ape is. Blue means that they're relaxed and oblivious to your presence, yellow is alert, which means that they suspect something foul at play, but can't put their monkey fingers to what that is yet. And red means that they're fully alarmed, which makes them either run away from you or on the contrary, attack you at the earliest chance. All of the apes also have personalities, which you can figure out based on their shorts. So yellow is standard, blue is timid and red is aggressive. With all that knowledge, you are now ready to set off on a mission to save the future by changing the past. Other than the countless regular enemies, there are bosses in Ape Escape too, and these are usually pretty big and require a different mechanic to beat. And since you'll visit many different times and locations, prepare to control some unique vehicles too, like tanks, rafts and the likes. Overall, lack of content is not Ape Escape's problem in any capacity, and other than some odd camera angles from time to time, I don't think that there's anything to complain about in the game at all. Ape Escape is fantastic. Despite being released over a quarter of the century ago and on the system well known for tons of excellent games, it remains as playable as it originally was. And so that we're clear, I consider most of these early 3D platformers to either be borderline unplayable because of the controls, or too ugly in their early 3D iterations to be worth my very limited time. Ape Escape is colorful and plays like a freaking charm, which makes it a timeless classic. Bioforge is a 3D action adventure similar in how it's made to classic survival horrors like Alone in the Dark and the first few Resident Evil games. That said, it's not a horror at all, but a dark sci-fi futuristic story that only shares tank controls and technology with them. Well, maybe the suspense and gradual slow storytelling too, but mainly the tech and controls. So the environments are pre-rendered and feature static camera viewpoints, and only items and characters on them are the real-time rendered polygonal objects. It is set in the far-off, but undisclosed future, and while we can't tell when exactly, we know it's far enough for humanity to be able to travel the universe with relative ease. Bioforge's backstory is centered around Mondites, which are this independent, fanatical group of religious science freaks who are laser focused on conquering of the galaxy and overthrowing of the intergalactic government known as the Reticulum. Yep, definitely not Rectum. Their philosophy of evolution through cybernetic implanting humans with machine parts is based on their former findings of the technological spoils of an ancient but advanced and now gone race of aliens known as Fix. They found Fix's former homeworld, a moon in a remote sector of the galaxy which they named Daedalus, and quickly established base there to investigate, study and learn from the now disappeared race. So to advance their beliefs and reach their evil goal, they abduct people and imprison them on Daedalus to experiment on them. You know, pinch and prod them, put a finger here or there, use temperature high and low, and show them reruns of first few episodes of the classic Twin Peaks. That kind of a thing. Mondites are led by a mad scientist Dr. Mastaba, who mutilates both his alive and dead subjects, seeking way to turn them into ultimate killing machines. That seeking part should be the best indicator of how severe the number of failures under Mastaba's belt is. Saying that he killed more than he kept alive is an understatement, as there's literally have only been a handful of survivors of his experiments, and nearly none of them remained in full control of not only their bodies, but also minds. During numerous gruesome trials on both humans and mostly dead Fix, one of the aliens gets accidentally revived from his suspended animation and goes on a wild rampage through the complex. He damages the reactor and kills almost half of the base personnel before it's contained. You can only imagine how pissed Mastaba was and how big of a setback the incident was. I mean, he skipped dinner and breakfast on the following day and even did not go to see his child's school play. And she played a tree for God's sake. That's like the third most important role a child can have. Straight after Baby Jesus and Shakespeare's Romeo's best friend, Luke from Hackney, known for his beautiful singing voice and love for all things that are illegal and mind-warping. This, my dear viewers, is where the game begins. And this is also where your character awakens. And he's one of the handful of successful subjects that survived cutting, prodding and installation of numerous often unnecessary implants, like a built-in coffee maker, which would be great if he also had any kind of a water source to brew it. As it stands now, he can only heat up a cup. You are experimental unit AP-127 and come with 2-page strong, friendly, large font instructions saying to feed you batteries and keep you at an arm's length. And nobody knows why. You have virtually no recollection of where you are, and even who you were before. And it sucks. Because you had to have a life of sorts that you could at least in some capacity come back to. Maybe you were a barista. That would be ironic, right? Anyway, your mission, if you can even call it that, maybe I'll stick to adventure. So... your adventure will take you on an action and puzzles-packed roller coaster of self-discovery that will help you seek out your past, learn of your tormentor, and seek a way to escape captivity, preferably in that particular order. The majority of Bioforge's gameplay comprises of exploration, puzzle solving, and interaction with NPCs, be it verbal or physical, in 1v1 combat. And these encounters that you'll find yourself in will require smart tactics rather than the brute force to win. So, learning the rhythm of the combat, so to speak. How long each attack takes, how to position yourself, and what chains of kicks and punches to throw at the enemy is a key to success. I mean, you can also get guns too, but the large chunks of fights you'll participate in will not have access to them. So master the controls, and if needed, learn how to use anything and everything that you can to your advantage. A pipe, cringe joke, or your opponent's dismembered arm, it's irrelevant. If you can utilize it somehow to beat them to a pulp, you should. Some components on your body, like the super powerful special projectile weapon, along with health regeneration system and even protective shield among others, all use energy and require replaceable batteries to work. In fact, you will spend a lot of time seeking and replacing them. You'll be like a huge Duracell rabbit, only not as cute. You'll get to upgrade the batteries at some point too, provided that you stick with the game and not drop it like a hot potato, so it doesn't have to be as big of an issue as I might have made it sound like. Most of the puzzles, however, being directly connected to the plot are timed and will require the use of computer terminals to solve, to remotely control other machines and robots, to open doors or bypass security systems. They are not overly complicated, but the time adds to the urgency and may lead to unintentional rushing-related mistakes. If you're someone who likes to read everything that the game throws at you, then you'll find a lot of tasty treats within countless data logs and notes in the game, and they will not only provide a useful background to it all, but also drive the narrative forward. It's a captivating and interesting story to follow and well worth learning at least once. The aforementioned combat, however, is notoriously difficult, and since you'll need to practice a lot to get good at it, prepare to memorize the early sections of the game as you'll get to see them quite often. Other than all that, Bioforge was known for the character having wounds and blood appear on him as he sustains damage, laser beams from weapons, bouncing off of reflective metal surfaces, and skeletal-based animation. And that last was not an industry standard in 1995 as it is now. Bioforge is a very special title and hopefully one you'll want to play and complete. Panzer Dragoon is a fantastic on-rail shooter that I'm sure you've managed to forget about years ago, despite drooling over it sometime around 1995 or 1996. It's a first in the series of games that originated on Sega Saturn before being ported to other major systems. And as rail shooters go, it's easily one of the best ever and an excellent example of how this should be made, focusing on fun, hectic and action-packed gameplay and not overflowing it with tons of questionable usability features. Panzer Dragoon is composed out of 6 levels and comprises of combat with numerous enemies and variety of boss battles. So it may sound like a case of nothing new really, and it's a pretty fair assessment as it's really not. Everything that the game is built out of was so polished that it's a pure pleasure going through it even today. So you sit comfortably on your huge-ass dragon and drive that nuclear-powered beast through a linear on-rail path, spreading death and destruction all around, all naturally running as smoothly as it could on Sega's doomed system. Now, you may wonder where I did get that earlier nuclear bit from, cause it's definitely not in the game's story. But if you think about it, like really give it a minute of your time, what were the dragons really if not biological nuclear reactors? They spit out fiery plasma to cool their atom-splitting inner reactors down, and have a fail-safe anti-nuclear leakage mechanism in the form of wings that they can use to take themselves high up to explode at relative safe distance from populated areas. And what's more, they use gold as a catalyst for that reaction, which is also dragon lore accurate when you consider it as a reason behind their love for the treasures. All that said, in Panzer Dragoon you're not actually using fire breath as a weapon at all. You have quick gunshots from your rider's handgun, which are great to target enemies' weak spots, and slower, but also more powerful, homing laser fired by the dragon. It can lock on up to 8 enemies at once, providing excellent screen clearing capabilities. There are no other weapons in the game. And even if these two only may seem like not much, the action is so fast and there are so many enemies you'll hardly get the time to think about it. You have a 360 degrees field of view available, meaning that you can always look to either of the sides and behind you. It may not be crucial at first, but in time, fast and quick reactions and response to dangers coming from all sides will be extremely important, especially because the enemies will be swooping in and diving at you from everywhere. Panzer Dragoon's presentation was pretty sweet, which may come as a surprise when you learn that its natural, ancient and technological barren post-apo aesthetics mix actually comes from hardware limitations of the system, and the scarcity of objects was a choice to keep the game running smoothly, with all the enemies and projectiles on the screen all at once using up all of Saturn's processing power. Similarly, a choice for a dragon and not traditional for the genre helicopter, jet fighter, hovercraft or tank came from the idea for a game to feel more unique and different than anything else. Even the dragon itself, while being traditional green in the early builds of the game, was quickly changed into a blue one with white armor elements to look more sci-fi and in line with the post-apo feel and the story of the game. And these are but a few examples of how everything about Panzer Dragoon's design was dictated by some kind of limitations or the will for the game to be its own thing and not follow any earlier releases. And you know what? Knowingly or not, they've hit the nail on the head and the game looked and felt fantastic. The story of Panzer Dragoon centers around you playing a scale fluge, which sounds like one of those illnesses you feel embarrassed about when talking to a doctor even, and his struggle against evil imperial forces and even more evil Black Dragon. And while all 6 levels are rather demanding, if you know what you're doing and you've mastered the game, you can pretty much complete it in under an hour. But if you're not a joystick assassin, or in this particular case a gamepad virtuoso, Panzer Dragoon should provide a lot of fun and replayability for weeks, before you eventually manage to complete it when you least expect it. Sunset Riders is one of my most favorite arcade games ever and also amazing western-themed side-scrolling run and gunner. It was developed by Konami and released in 1991, and over the next 2 years received ports to Sega Genesis and SNES respectively. While these two were pretty fun and well-made games in their own right, neither really got close to the quality or content available in the arcade original, which released in two versions actually, a 2-player and 4-player cabinets. And I don't have to tell you that while playing it with a friend was fun, when 4 people got into it, it was a riot. It's worth noting that 2-player cabinet allowed you to pick who to play as, while the 4-player one had its controls assigned to particular characters. I mean, with all the cowboys coming at you, guns blazing, bulls running seemingly on random right through the center of the town, and dynamite sticks appearing out of nowhere, man, there was so much going on the screen at once, it was hard to keep up. But with 4 of you playing, you were sure that it was not only you always tanking these shots, as whomever wanted to get better weapons or more action had to jump ahead, and that could end in all sorts of ways. So while you were playing together against an onslaught of bodies, you were also kinda playing against each other, and in that, Sunset Riders was truly a very one-of-a-kind experience. Sunset Riders is set in a romanticized version of American Wild West, so you know, the one you saw in all the spaghetti westerns of yore, and follows 4 bounty hunters, Steve, Billy, Bob and Cormano. They are all hunting outlaws, for killing of which they are rewarded rather steep bounties, like plenty enough for a horse and a hat, maybe, just maybe, cowboy shoes too. And if you take a look at how they dress, our heroes that is, and how clean their clothes are, and then keep in mind when and where the game is set, you'll realize that the cash that they needed to shell out to keep their clothes sparking clean was no joke. I mean, if they had no traveling clothes washer with them, was that even an occupation back then? I don't know. Or some kind of rudimentary old-timey manual washing machine, I imagine them spending upwards of a quarter of each bounty just to look as sharp as they do. Anyway, each of them has their own weapons, so Steve and Billy being the Sub-Zero and Scorpion of this game, both wield revolvers, Bob has a rifle, and everyone's favorite Cormano uses a double-barrel shotgun. And while theoretically they're all very similar and interchangeable, there's a reason why most of us pick some over others. Rest assured though, the game can be completed with any of them, provided you know what you're doing. There are 8 bounties to complete overall, so 8 stages, and each ends with a boss fight. And these are all super fun to figure out the mechanics of, and then implement them to beat them to the pulp. Or shoot them till they die, which is actually more lore and game accurate. And the "bury me with my money" quote that the first boss blurts out when beaten stayed with me forever, as a memento of that game, and also a reminder that it's worth to have the FU money, so plenty enough not to worry about anything and just live out your life to the fullest, traveling and whatnot, but it's also not worth to aim for more than you could ever use. The player who does the most damage to the boss is the only one getting the entire bonus for beating it, so keep that in mind. Out of all 8 stages, 5 are played on foot, 2 on horseback and 1 on a moving train, and there are also 2 bonus levels after the 2nd and 5th regular stage in which you're shooting outlaws as they pop up for extra points. Now if you think that the game ends straight after the 8th level, you must have forgotten that Sunset Riders is an arcade game through and through and designed to eat coins. So when you go through them all, they restart from the first at an increased difficulty. And the loop carries on until you finally fail, get too tired to keep playing or it goes on forever. The last 2 are definitely not something I experienced, as despite loving the game to bits, I was never very good at it. There are only 2 upgrades in the game, Gold and Silver Sheriff Stars, and the first grants you automatic fire, while the second gives you an additional gun. And since you can have both at once, it's not the either-or case here at all. Sunset Riders' controls are rather simple, as aside from joystick you only get 2 buttons, one for shooting and one for jumping, but many of the stages allow for suspending from higher placed objects or jumping between high-hanging platforms and ground. It may not sound like much, but given how frantic the action is and how everything keeps changing on the screen constantly, you'll hardly get a chance to ponder about the number of buttons at hand. Both SNES and Genesis versions are pretty decent too, but while the earlier remains more or less faithful to the arcade original, with some small tweaks and changes here and there on the account of the processing power and / or Nintendo's child-friendliness, the Genesis port is considerably different. There are only 2 characters in it, 4 bosses, and each of the 4 levels is split into 2 stages. There are some hardware-based changes to the presentation too, but these are much less prominent and disappointing. All in all, if you have a choice, always go for the arcade version, as it's not only the most feature-rich, but also the best looking and playing. YoYo's Puzzle Park never reached the American shores. The farthest that it managed to get outside of Japan was Europe, and American gamers were deprived of overlooked gem of a game. And for that, shame on you, Japan. And for that again, I'm sorry you've been mistreated, USA. So, with that rubber ducky moment out of the way, let's wipe that single masculine tear off and talk about the game. YoYo's is a single-screen action platformer, and unlike Bubble Bobble in its overarching premise of having to remove bodies from each of its numerous levels within given time and at all cost. But it's also completely original and fresh-feeling romp for up to 2 players. Similarly to Konami's classic, YoYo's actually adds a lot of fun mechanics to the formula, but we'll get to them in a minute after we briefly tackle its short like an ice cream-fueled fart story. Gasun Paradise, or Nanoda Paradise theme park, depending on the version of the game, is opening and everyone's going crazy about it. All manner of people and creatures are happily heading its way to have the time of their life. On a side note, I'm not a huge fan of amusement parks myself, so while I can imagine how fired up they are, if I was there, I'd be that dude, recording it all for YouTube from a safe and comfortable distance. As the park opens, evil but cute-looking creature known as YoYo invades it, takes it over in one sweep and not shown in the intro tactical move, and takes all the guests within hostage. Since neither police nor anyone else is capable of dealing with the Green Man, cause yeah, he's green like Charlie from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia whenever Eagles are playing, it's up to our 2 heroes Gasun and Jody to save the day. And since YoYo is not alone and has his army of equally as evil followers with him, it will take at least 60 levels worth of fun for our duo to emerge victorious. It may not be the most sophisticated story out there, but it's also just a platformer, so it doesn't really have to be, now does it? YoYo's Puzzle Park can be played in either solo or cooperative mode, and it's obviously more fun with a friend. The gameplay mostly comprises of clearing of successive screens of the vermin that populates it, by firstly stunning them and then either tossing them at constantly respawning sentient bombs or just bombs at them. You know, dealer's choice. Bombs require igniting, which you do with the same throwable poppers that used to stun bodies, and the more of them are at a particular location, the bigger the explosion. So stacking of both bombs and enemies in a single spot before blowing them all up is a viable strategy. Viable, worth tons of points, and most importantly fun too. Because despite how convoluted I might have made it sound with my half-assed explanation, the flow of YoYo's is actually very easy to understand and the gameplay is hella fun. So the better you get at it, the faster you'll be able to clear the stages and also progress through the game. Skilled players can often complete numerous stages in few short minutes, but I'm sure you can guess, being the long-time viewer of this channel, that I'm not one. All of what I just said may make YoYo sound like another Bubble Bobble clone, but it's so much more than that. I mean, just look at it. Look how cute, cheerful and full of life everything is. Even the bodies that you remove and that are supposed to be menacing look as if they were having the time of their life, skip stepping along the stage happily. And the bombs? Well, they look like they just wanna burst into a firework of colors. Power-ups too are super fun and allow you to turn seemingly difficult situation into one you'll breeze through. The UFO, for instance, enables thrust, which you can use to boost around the screen. There is also a piercing laser shot that's great against any enemy in its range, or even soda bottle that grants a nice and welcome boost of speed. And these are just a few. But what really makes YoYo special, and is a true star of the show, are the stages. Some of them may twist, others may have platforms appear on them seemingly on random, even different ones will be overflowing with water. There's tons of them, and they not only look and feel different, but also add that extra degree of randomness that keeps YoYo such a blast to play. Sure, I get it, single-screen platformers may not be a genre for everyone, and I agree. I mean, I don't care much for RTSs or overly realistic combat simulations as I suck at them, simple as that, but when you get a friend and when you just don't know what to play, I guarantee that YoYo's Puzzle Park will keep you both glued to the screen and having a lot of fun. So if you happen to collect games for the first PlayStation, or emulate them to play with friends, this one is definitely not a game to skip. Trust me. You know, I love making those Forgotten Treasures videos because they allow me to talk about games that we rarely hear about or even manage to forget as years went by. And even if these videos don't get as many views as some of the games in them deserve, I hope that I can at least spark interest in some of the titles, as they are usually really good. So, if any of today's choices is something you'd like to try out, I'd appreciate if you let me know in the comments below. Also, likes, subs and even more so bell icon down there too, please click them to be notified when I release something new. For now though, take care of yourself, eat good food and play games.